dear guests, dear media representatives, representatives of the consulates and embassies, excellencies, dear rectors, dear professors from the universities, dear students, and above all, dear journalists. Thank you very much for such a response coming for our today's session of Sarajevo Talks. Before I say anything, I would like to kindly ask you to give respect in a minute of silence and our prayers to the, and I'd like to kindly ask you to stand and give a minute of silence to slain journalists, give them respects in your prayers, or just simple minute of silence. Thank you. Thank you. May God bless their souls. And we'll keep them in our prayers, definitely. On behalf of the organizing committee of Sarajevo Talks, I wish to extend my deepest gratitude to all of you coming today for such an important topic. Before, I'll just say a few words on Sarajevo Talks. It is our new platform, and this is our second conference. So basically, a new platform that offers the media and a space for various thinkers, decision makers, dignitaries, researchers, professors, journalists, basically to come forward and say what they want to say, but also to give their proposals and ideas for the way forward. Today, our idea is basically state of the media and the basically status of the journalist. Today we have perhaps, certainly we have not gathered for the occasion that we are all proud of, but we want to pay respects to all those journalists who have basically been slain in the past 12 months. Just to name few, we have those very famous names basically that were killed. Daphne Galizia, just not to, I hope I pronounce their names properly. Jan Kuciak, Victoria Marinova, and the latest, Jamel Keshavjee, that we are going to talk today. Our program is rather brief. We'll have our Director General, Mr. Wadah Khanfar of Al Jazeera Networks, who will say a few words and who will also introduce our special session speaker today, Mr. Wadah Khanfar. They've been close friends for a very long time, and it is best that he speaks and he explains who Wadah Khanfar is. It will be followed by dialogue session that will be, then Mr. Wadah Khanfar, our special guest, that we are very grateful that he made it today here with us. He will have his speech for about half an hour. It will be followed by a dialogue session that will be chaired by Associate Professor Eshef Kenan Rashdagic from Political Science, Faculty of Political Sciences, University of Sarajevo. And then we'll go for, of course, you're all welcome to ask questions in a dialogue session, certainly. And we will conclude our concluding remarks with by our Mr. Harun Karcic from Al Jazeera Balkans. Thank you very much. Now I kindly ask Mr. Wadah Khanfar to introduce our keynote speaker today.
Dear friends, guests, ladies and gentlemen, however we should call you, Your Excellencies, thank you very much and good afternoon. Thank you very much first for coming because it's very heartening and I'm very happy to see such numbers for any kind of program that anybody organizes, let alone something that we sometimes feel it's far from us or that we feel distanced from that. I will introduce today's speaker, but just to say a few words that I have also mentioned earlier to the media. I feel that our society here, but I guess it's the same situation everywhere, became very cynical about journalism and about journalists. They somehow are very fast, we are very fast to find faults and mistakes on parts of journalists without really appreciating their side of the story. In what kind of conditions do they work? Or what they have to know. We assume they have to know everything. It's not easy. A journalist has to cover a lot of topics. Of course, he will make mistakes. Sometimes they are not paid well. They are being prosecuted everywhere. The Jamel Khashoggi's case is too brutal, and it became really very symbolic. But journalists have been prosecuted and are still prosecuted everywhere. We feel that, there is some glamour around that. I don't think so. And I said, I think our society really does not appreciate enough their work, including journalists in this country and in this region. About the speaker, Wadah Khanfar is former Director General of Al Jazeera Network. He's the gentleman who created Al Jazeera as we know it today. When he assumed the position, Al Jazeera had only one channel, which was Al Jazeera Arabic. He expanded it. Al Jazeera English came along that way, Al Jazeera Mubashir, Al Jazeera Egyptian version. He opened Center for Studies, Training Center. He started Al Jazeera Sport. It became, at one time, network of 20 over channels. Now it's called Bein Sport, and I think it has more than 150 channels, and it's stable, maybe even more. But before that, Wadah was one of us. He is Palestinian by birth, and we know what we Bosnians think about Palestine. This is why I say he is one of us. And even though an engineer by training and by his interests, of course, he can be many things. His knowledge is very wide. When we met, he was a student leader. It was in an African city. Let me not mention which is the particular city. And then he moved to South Africa and opened a center of Arab African studies there. And when Al Jazeera started, Al Jazeera Arabic, he was one of the first journalists to cover Africa. Initially only South Africa, then he started covering the whole of Africa. And he covered war in Afghanistan when America attacked Afghanistan, and he covered war in Iraq. At that time, in both places, Al Jazeera's offices were bombed by the coalition forces. Whether they said it was accidental or not, it doesn't matter. So Wadah's friends were killed, arrested, wounded in all of these places, and I think it was a visionary move of the former Emir of Qatar to ask him to take over the post. He had no political interests or connections or whatever it is that is very much needed, especially in Bosnia nowadays, to get some important position. Wadah has built that, and then the crucial moment for us came in 2010 when there was an opportunity to come into the media game here. It was actually himself who said, why doesn't Al Jazeera come and take over TV 99? And then that is how the story of Al Jazeera Balkans came about, and this is why we're having this conference today, and this is why I hope we are having a genuine world-class media that is based in Sarajevo for the past 7 years. After that, Wadah has, after he has completed his mission in Al Jazeera, he has went on to do different work. He has been promoting positive ideas, positive change in societies, especially in the area where he comes from. This is why he calls his forum Sharq, the East, wherever that East may come from. You know, the Westerners call it Orient. And he has done a great job, and I'm very glad to tell you that he is going to extend that work of Sharq Forum also to Bosnia, and that he will be launching tonight also the Sharq Youth Hub in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Without any further time and ado taken, I invite Mr. Wadah Khanfar to give his speech. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming. And I hope that today will be a day that all of us participate in forming and shaping ideas and thoughts and initiatives about the topic that we are going to discuss, which is one of the most important topics, beside the fact that it is very timely at this stage when everyone is talking about journalism, journalists, and the crimes committed against journalists. On the 2nd of November, we are going to celebrate internationally the UN International Annual Day to end impunity against the crimes committed against journalists. So let us join that international effort in order to propose something from Sarajevo that could become an international declaration. And I will come back to that. 5 weeks ago, I had a conversation and lunch with a friend of mine and a colleague in Istanbul. During that lunch, we had a lot of conversation about issues related to journalism and issues related to him personally. Amongst the issues related to him personally was the fact that he was about to get married and he was excited about the new adventure that he's going to live. And he was at that time building the new nest for his marriage, having a flat, furnishing that flat, and also himself and his fiancée trying to get together in order to shape the new life that they're going to have. He had a lot of hope as a human being. He thought that this is a new beginning for him. We had a lot of discussion about our reality in the Arab world, in his country, Saudi Arabia, and internationally. We share the pain of witnessing our region descending into brutal chaos and going back in to an environment that resembles the dark ages that Europe abandoned 3 or 4 centuries ago. We spoke a lot about what could be done. We agreed that the most important element of the future of our region is going to be freedom and democracy. Without having a culture that enables the human being to be human being, enables men and women of our region to enjoy the basic rights of human existence, freedom of expression, the ability to voice their opinion, and to have in them the responsibility to build their societies, definitely will have very dark environment. We spoke about democracy and freedom. He spoke to me about his foundation that he intends to establish to sponsor democracy in the Arab world. He called it at that time Dawn, democracy in the Arab world now. Dawn in Arabic means as well, the word in Arabic means Fajr, which is the dawn. So he wanted this to be a declaration of hope for the generation to come in order to proceed for a new era, rather than succumbing to the constraints of oppression and authoritarian regimes that our region is plagued with. We had that fantastic lunch. I enjoyed his company for years. We know each other and we spoke a lot about it. And he participated in a Sharq Forum conference that was held on the 22nd of September. Then I suggested that I'm going to London for a conference about Oslo agreement held by a think tank, and maybe it will be great if we both of us could join. He said, yes, that would be great because I have few days left. Let us go to London. So we went to London. We participated in that conference. We shared the panel, and we had excellent time, again, discussing a lot of issues related to the future of the region, meeting with journalists, and making interviews with them. He told me that he has to rush back to Istanbul in order to go to the consulate of Saudi Arabia to get a paper, a routine paper. Normally, you get it as any citizen walking in for registering his marriage. So he wanted to register his marriage, the new marriage, and the authorities in Turkey are requesting certain documents that he would like to go. Of course, no one feels happy to visit Normally, in any civilized society, you visit your embassy or your consulate and you feel that you are visiting your land. But in the case of him, I was worried, and he was worried to an extent, that, you know what, it is not a great, actually, trip. It should be done, okay, but, you know, we need to be careful. He said, yes, I will be careful. I will ask my fiancée to, you know, call friends if I am delayed, because the worst that could come to his mind at that stage is to be held maybe for a few hours, or to be negotiated with, or to be in a way forced to leave. And the worst, of course, is to take him back, as they did to many other opposition figures. But the fact that he said to me, I'm not an opposition, I'm a journalist. I'm not part of any political party. I am not opposing the regime. I am just trying to help and reform. So therefore, I don't think that anything could be done to me. Especially we are visiting a consulate on a foreign land. I mean, what's going to happen? I think, now thinking about that particular incident, that both of us were wrong. Why? Because we could not envisage the amount of evil that could reside in regimes like ours. He visited the consulate on the 2nd of October, almost 1 month ago, and he did not come out. His fiancée phoned me 3 hours after this incident, and she said, Jamel Khashoggi went into the embassy or to the consulate, but he has not come back. What should I do? I said, this is very serious. I started making some telephone calls with the friends and some people in the authorities, and also I asked her to report to the police immediately and to see what could be done. And of course, the rest of the story you are aware of. It has become an international major story for the last month, which almost every newspaper and TV and a media outlet in the world did speak about it. Jamel Khashoggi, when he went inside the consulate, he was called to the Consular General office, and then there he was attacked by people, at least 2 or 3 of them, and he was sedated by certain kind of drugs, and then he was actually suffocated by putting a plastic bag on his head. And while he was still alive, they started chopping his body into pieces, and they cut him into at least 15 pieces inside the Consulate General office, put him into bags, plastic bags, transferring the parts of his body outside the consulate into locations which we have not yet known, and his body has not been found 1 month after his murder. Why such crime was committed in this magnitude? Simply because a regime that committed the crime is capable of doing so. And simply because a regime like that, again, you should remember the Middle Ages, or let us call it the Dark Ages of Europe. You own the people, you own the land, and everyone is surprised. Why are you making big issue about it? This is exactly the words of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Saudi Arabia. Why the big issue? Why the big issue? Why are we talking so much and loudly about a situation like this? You know, really, think about it. It used to be done everywhere. Slaves used to be crucified and killed or burned. And it's okay. It's your property. We are living regimes like that. In the 21st century, we have leaders who still believe that they own the land and the people on the land. And it is them and their mandate and jurisdiction that should rule over that land, and the world has nothing to do with it. You are a Saudi citizen, so why everyone is concerned? It's not your business. And when the pressure was mounted, okay, we'll investigate it. And the people who committed the crime, 15 of them, 5 are from the details of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and the rest are connected to the regime directly. And the person who cut him personally, he mutilated the body, was the head of forensic department, belongs to the state, and flew in 2 jets, belong to the state, went into a consulate, which is a diplomatic mission, in the office of a consular general, and then after that they tell you it is rogue elements. The leadership doesn't know about this. It has been done without knowledge of the Crown Prince, who is the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia. Now, of course, no one is buying into that kind of narrative, and you saw that the world has rejected this, and there is an international campaign in order to understand what exactly happened and who is responsible. We know what happened, but who is responsible until now has not been acknowledged by the authorities of Saudi Arabia. Why I am speaking about Jamal in particular? Because I see in Jamal, not Jamal the human being only, but I see the cause of journalism being slaughtered and being mutilated in front of the public. I see in Jamal colleagues who have been killed across the world, including Europe. In 2017, we have 71 journalists who have been murdered, most of them for political reasons. They have been investigating certain issues, and then they ended being killed, either by people close to authorities, or by gangsters, or by people who wanted the truth to be hidden. That is something that all of us should face and should acknowledge. We have war against journalists and journalism across the world. Mr. Trump declared that journalists are the enemies of the people. And if Mr. Trump, the leader of the biggest country in the so-called free world, could declare journalists to be the enemies of the people, then did the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, when he ordered the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, really went against the international so-called norm and consensus? When the gangsters who shot our colleagues in many countries in Europe and Latin America felt that they are really going against something, against the norms that everyone is talking about, there is, during the last few years, and we have now reached a peak where this profession is under attack, not only from rogue states and dictators, but also even from people sitting in the White House. This is something that all of us should realize and act upon it. What is amazing about the situation that we are witnessing regarding Jamal, in particular, Jamal Khashoggi, is the fact that for the first time, the campaign to know the truth about his killing is not led actually by judiciary, neither by traditional forces, which means states and authorities. It is led by journalists themselves. This is why I feel that this case, it is symbolic. It symbolizes a new awakening within the journalist and journalistic circles internationally that could be built upon, and we could follow this campaign in order to establish something in the future. This is why I do believe that journalists are, in this particular moment, in need to take this process forward to become an international declaration of protecting journalists and to withdraw the mandate of countries and governments that do not respect human rights and do not have minimum standards of judiciary, to take out the mandate over journalists to an international body. And the grand journalists who are under pressure and persecution or atrocities from regimes, grant them the title international citizens, with a mandate belong to the United Nations rather than their governments. What we need these governments sometimes for is for a piece of paper. Jamal Khashoggi went to the consulate of his country for a small piece of paper. Because of that piece of paper, he was murdered. A lot of other journalists would like to continue fighting for the cause of journalism, but they cannot because they need passports. And when their passports end, they cannot renew it. We need new authorities that could cover legally the needs of journalists like that. Papers, passports, documents, and also give them the international impunity in order to continue doing their job. And this is why I would like to say that since all of us on the 2nd of November are celebrating the day to end impunity, of people who commit or governments commit crimes against journalists, I would like to follow on that and say we need a declaration, a new declaration, and I suggest that we call it Jamal Khashoggi International Declaration, not only to lift the impunity against the regimes, but also to grant journalists who have been persecuted illegally in their countries, to grant them international citizenship with international status that nation states cannot actually have access to. Now, who are we, journalists? What exactly I mean by journalists? And what are the journalists that you, as people, colleagues, or civil society organizations, or decent politicians, or people who are actually just benefiting from environment of free journalism, what do you expect from us? That also is very important. Because if I say to you, please come protect us, please do a lot of good things to us, you would ask me and say, what kind of journalists are you referring to? Because I and you have witnessed a lot of journalists and a lot of journalistic organizations that are serving only powers. They are serving power and they're serving the wealthy, and they are not actually standing for the ideals that all of us are demanding from journalists. This is why I would say there are 5 elements. I wish if these 5 elements becomes the pillar of what we call decent journalism. The first one is integrity. I remember when Jamal Khashoggi decided 1.5 years ago to leave Saudi Arabia, he spoke to me before he left. And he said, I'm going to leave. Now, Jamal, for those who do not know him, he was serving his country. He was serving the embassy of Saudi Arabia in London, the embassy of Saudi Arabia in Washington, and he was the chief editor of a main semi-official government newspaper in Saudi Arabia called Al-Watan. It means he was part of the institution. But it reached a point 1.5 years ago where he was not able to express the minimum of opinion. At that time, we in the world asking for freedom of expression. In some of our countries, including Saudi Arabia, now we are demanding freedom of silence, not expression. Because these regimes are not allowing people to be silent. They are pressurizing people to express their support to the regime without any boundaries. And if you keep silent, it means you are not supporting the regime and becoming a puppet and a voice of corruption and support for these tyrants, then you will be classified as the enemy of the state. So the enemy of the state in our situation is not those who speak, those who keep even silent. This we have reached a phase which is extremely dark. It is the Inquisition that Europe did face one day, and hundreds of years ago, you got rid of it. Integrity was important. Jamal answered and said, I am a journalist. And if I don't write or express my opinion, I am not going to live. I'm going to die. I cannot respect myself if I don't voice my opinion. While I am in Saudi Arabia, I cannot. So I need to leave. To leave for someone in 60 years old is not an easy job. To leave when you have children and family, to leave when you have satisfactory life, comfort, it is not an easy choice. It is very courageous one. Integrity means that you have mission. You have a duty. You put your duty above your job when it is necessary. And you put your mission as a journalist above the necessities of trying to secure your personal life and your personal environment. Jamal chose, because of his integrity, to abandon all of that, to abandon the glamour and comfort and living in his homeland, and to choose self-exile. Integrity, a human being, a good human being, is a necessity to be a good journalist. A good journalist is necessarily a good human being. You cannot be a great journalist that people should appreciate and protect and stand for if you are not a good human being as well, who has integrity and who is willing to sacrifice. When we are asking you to protect us, you should have asked us before, did you sacrifice for our sake? If we do sacrifice for the public good, for the sake of the public, then the public should protect journalists like that. But if we become part of the machine, the corrupt one, part of serving centers of power, then we may not need even your protection because we'll be protected by the centers of power, and you don't need to offer us any respect because we have betrayed the cause that we're supposed to stand for. The second one after integrity is empathy. Great journalists that I have come across in the world are those who have great, beautiful, lovely feeling towards the people. They put people at the center of their paradigm. They put people at the center of their mission. They serve the public. They ask themselves always, am I publishing or writing or broadcasting something that is for the sake of the good of the public, or am I doing it in order just to be a friend with those in power? In my opinion, empathy is the most important when it comes to connection with people. With people, I mean with ordinary people, not with those who are sitting in their palaces or those who are sitting in their boardrooms. Only with people your allegiance should be. That is very important and necessary. Once you have that, people will love you as well and will fight for you and will protect you. And without empathy, without knowing exactly what the people's interest would be, you may as well sell out the cause and leave from within the atmosphere which we call great journalism. The third one, balance. I remember Jamel Khashoggi at the beginning of his writing, even outside the country, he did actually write positively about the reforms, some of the reforms that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia did. But also he was critical of other things. Balance, it means you are not ideologically driven. Truly, a journalist, to be faithful to his mission, he should not be driven neither by pragmatism, nor ideology, or political opposition that classifies him as one-dimensional in his judgment. Balance is very important. Distance of being personally involved in favoring one party against the other or one regime against the other, but also trying to give people information to judge for themselves rather than appointing yourself as custodian of the truth for them. You are informing them, educating, giving them the truth, positive and negative, and let them choose. That is a great journalist. Not the one who is giving people slogans or giving people pre-organized thoughts that reflect his personality rather than the truth and reality. Diverse knowledge is extremely important. A lot of journalists do sometimes report about certain elements, but they fail to contextualize it. And therefore, they mislead the public. Any information or any data, if it is not put within a framework of context and analysis, might be very misleading. So this is why I'm saying sometimes data is accurate lies. It is accurate, but once put in a framework that doesn't describe exactly the meaning of it, then it becomes actually harmful for the public. Our media today is flooded by accurate lies and flooded by what they call post-fact or post-truth journalism, which I hate it very much. This terminology I hate. This is another nice way of saying these are lies and fabrications. Our role as journalists, to read events within a prism of depth. Immediacy should be planted within a discourse of historical understanding. So when an immediate event happens, you cannot just narrate it without giving the framework, the history of it, the context of it. When we are describing issues to the public, we need to be aware of giving them what we know of its positives and negatives, so they may be informed. Vast knowledge of journalists is necessary. And those who specialize only in one particular angle, or only just narrating things, information, and data as it comes, most likely they're not serving the public good, they are feeding a machine. That machine could be sometimes not as accurate in its description of events. I love history, and I advise all those my colleagues in journalism, Al Jazeera was known of that as well, contextualizing documentaries, investigative journalism, depth, that is necessary. And social media, which I personally a great advocate of it, I think it has also added a layer of superficiality to media. Why? Because it seems to me that sometimes a lot of people have used it intentionally, especially governments. And in our part of the world, governments budget handsome amount of money in order to mislead the public through social media by attacking them, attacking the truth and disturbing the truth. In fact, our activists in the Arab world invented a terminology for those thousands of accounts who are trying to distort facts and attack people who have an opinion. We call them in Arabic الذباب الإلكترون, which means electronic flies, which is true to a large extent because they are creating noise and trying also to create some kind of fake scene around the truth that we are trying to spread around in media. So social media is necessary if the content is right. Social media could provide us with fake news more than traditional media to a large extent. And therefore, I would like to say that be careful, especially those who are active on social media, be careful of avoiding the arrogance of power. The fact that you have 1 million or 2 million or 3 million followers on Twitter or Facebook or so on and so forth doesn't mean anything if you are not really providing substance and content and interest to the public. People could follow, why not? But that doesn't mean power. That is an illusion of power. You must be careful not to fall in the trap of illusion of fame and illusion of power. Otherwise, you abandon the truth. The last one is courage. And this is the most important and difficult and complicated. You need to have courage. If you choose to be a journalist, if you have no courage, don't step into this profession. Because you will be definitely a threat to truth. Once in your life, or many times in your life as a journalist, will be faced by the following question. A matter of life and death, or a matter of falsehood and the truth. What are you going to choose? That's very important. And I think Jamal Khashoggi did face that choice in reality. A lot of us faced it, not necessarily through death, hijacked, killed, bombed, and sometimes even paid heavy price personally in their families and in their income and so on and so forth. Courage is important. A journalist without courage is actually an invitation from authorities in order to abuse him and to use him. You need to show courage. And believe me, always it is rewarding to be courageous. Because people will recognize that. If these 5 criteria exist in any journalistic association, journalistic outlet, or in any journalist, believe me, people will realize, will acknowledge, will support, and will stand for those who have these kind of criteria. At the end of my speech, I would like to direct your attention to the most important element in today, which I would like to again come back to it. Our responsibility as journalists is to provide the public with knowledge, not only with information. And knowledge, I mean by it, is proper, substantiated depth of reading events. Because of that, we will be face to face with power. Power in a form of a state, in a form of any authority, or in a form even of corporations. They would love not to see anyone challenging them. You speak truth to power, or you speak truth to public, you are directly in confrontation with centers of power that are trying to manipulate and concentrate power in their own realm. Then you shall be classified as an enemy of that particular power. If that happens, we need instruments to protect these journalists so they can continue providing the public with the proper information and the proper knowledge. These instruments are you. Every citizen now has a voice. And that voice, combined with other voices, becomes a flood of energy that could hold governments and hold institutions and corporations runs to their limits when they deal with journalists. You should not undermine the power of the public. In the case of Jamel Khashoggi, the first 2 days, when the government of Saudi Arabia started denying that he even was inside the embassy, but for a few minutes, when the voices across the world joined together, they started slowly releasing more confessions about what happened inside the embassy. Now, if that international voice was not there, I promise you would have never had even part of the truth that was revealed at this stage. So I would like to say I am a great supporter and I'm a great fan of the concept of the crowd, people, the voices of the public, the voices of civil society. We should not always wait for governments to tell us what to do or to institutions to lead us on the ground. Each one of us now have the possibility to express his voice and also to be able to join international campaigns across the world. The second element, now more than any moment in history, we are globalized. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the new age of internationalism. You remember one day, a few years ago, including my age, when I went 80s or 70s, we used to live with our village population or our town population, our nation population, and this is the most we know. Nowadays, any one of us could become international, not necessarily because he has abandoned his location where he is living in his geography, but because geography has been shifting through this huge space that we call the internet into something else. You can be an international citizen while you are in Sarajevo. You can join international organizations and become active while you are living in your village or town, wherever you are. You could become part of a global struggle for democracy or freedom or climate change while you are still living in your location or your suburb or your village. It does not matter. This age of internationalism was never the case in any moment in history since humans discovered fire. Therefore, we are qualified now to take that new sphere, new space into another level, which I call it value-centered one. Some of us are Muslims, some of us are Christians, some of us belong to other religions across the world. Fine. But there, at the heart of all religions, all cultures, there are values, human central values that bring us together. Today, as international citizens of this planet, we could be unified around international values that bring us together. I can add my voice to my colleagues in Brazil to protest against certain kind of corruption that might have been there. I can as well rally my support to people in South Africa if they are in need for it. I can be an active in preventing the killing of the Rohingya when they are attacked there. I can be even active on stopping the destruction of forests in certain territories in the world. The duty of international citizen is not only in the geography and the location where he is living in, it is an international duty around values. We need these values to be identified, and we need young people in particular to take it forward. The third one, be aware that the future is an integration, total integration between humans with their cultures and identities and backgrounds and ideologies, and between as well a sphere which is newborn one, we call it the internet. And this sphere has not reached its utmost levels. We are going to face new realities as far as definition of what is a human is, through nanotechnology, through the human, kind of manipulations that are happening at this stage. And there are immediate issues that need our attention. Otherwise, our children or grandchildren might not be able to understand or realize what exactly the concept of a human means. We might end with Homo sapiens 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, rather than the Homo sapiens that we have known in our generation. We might be the last generation, actually, that is organically grown or natural. And the new generations could be, designed in laboratories based on certain specifications. Be aware of that. That is a global issue and international issue that needs your attention and your struggle as well to make it something good for humanity rather than a manipulation of a human being in a way. I end by calling again. Here from Sarajevo, I would like to call upon the international community to have a declaration through the United Nations and the Human Rights Council of two major points. The first one, a journalist persecuted and harmed because of truth and because of his profession should be granted international citizenship and should have international protection legally wherever he is. The second, a government that practice any kind of pressure against people and the crimes against them, like killing or torture, and they do not have legitimate judicial system to hold people accountable to that, the judiciary, upon investigating this matter, should be in an international body, not in a local governmental body. These 2 points are necessary to save us if we are thinking of journalism as a good force in the society. And without have that international cover, I promise you that we will continue seeing not only Jamal Khashoggi kind of case, but hundreds and tens of journalists who have been actually killed and murdered. I was a journalist myself, still I'm a journalist, I'm proud to be a journalist, and I was also a Director General of Al Jazeera. When you ask me what was the worst moment in your life as a Director General, I will tell you when I had personally to make a call to a family of a journalist killed or murdered because of his profession. You won't imagine the feeling of a person breaking the news to a family of a colleague that he has been killed and murdered while he is on duty. It happened to us many times. Unfortunately, the last one was in Libya, 2011, when a journalist, a cameraman of Al Jazeera, was killed by Gaddafi intelligence, shot in the field and was killed. And I would never remember that evening. I will never forget that evening. I will never even forget the emotions attached to it. How do you break to the wife and the two kids of that young cameraman the news that their father has been killed while he is on duty? I would not like that to happen anywhere. And therefore, I think all of you who have known these kind of feelings, I think you should all be united in supporting this call and this declaration. And we are going to launch this internationally. And I know that journalists and colleagues across the world are really eager to come to a point where they get rid of this kind of oppressive, dark environment that we are operating in. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wadah Khanfar, for a very inspiring speech. Thank you for sharing your personal story with your friend and colleague, Mr. Jamel Keshavjee. And also thank you for giving us a crash course on good journalism. And I hope the initiative that at the end you propose will be taken forward to a new stage. We are carrying on with the dialogue session. I can see that Professor Rashdagic is also on the stage, so you are in good hands. I only hope the second part will be also as interesting as the first interesting, very and passionate speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edin, and thank you all for being here. It's my great pleasure and honor to chair this session after such an inspiring and amazing speech, and I thank you very much for an enlightening and very personal testimony about the profession you clearly like so much, and it's a great part of you. I'm teaching journalists as it's part of my job at university, and it's an amazing feeling to have someone who really lives this profession among ourselves, such as a distinguished speaker. You rose a number or you tackled a number of really important issues. I will try to raise a few points that I consider very important. I won't go for long because I really want to hand over the microphone to the audience, where I see a lot of distinguished Bosnian journalists, and I really hope they'll pick up on the issues that you have tackled in your speech, and I will continue discussion that I'm sure will be very, very productive. First of all, thank you very much for listing the qualities of that every journalist in this world should have. And this would be an ideal world if all the journalists will have the courage, integrity, empathy, and what's, for me, most important thing, probably the thorough knowledge of the things they're working on to be able to provide a comprehensive picture and reporting, which is very, very important, especially in this world that we can now freely call the post-truth world, where the thing that matters in order to get your idea of the truth forward and having sway over people is how knowledgeable you are in manipulating the social networks. This is really important. Journalism, according to many people, is dead because everyone can be a journalist. Anyone can pass his message and push his message on Facebook or Instagram or elsewhere. It's the educative function of the media that is so important in order to actually know and distinguish the fake news and then the truth news. The second issue that is really important for someone who is teaching international relations, such as myself, is the emphasizing the importance of democracy in the Middle East. This is really, really, really important point, what you made, that we should teach the people and we should change the paradigm in the Middle East and elsewhere that someone is a property of a ruler. You were right to point out that this was the case in Europe in the Middle Ages, when Catholic Church held the sway and gave the legitimacy to the rulers, and rulers then considered everyone under their jurisdiction their property. Unfortunately, 21st century, we can see now clearly that in some of the richest countries in the world and key parts and partners in the international society, the rulers still consider their subjects to be their personal property that they can deal with as they wish. And this brings me to the third and probably most important point today, and that's the role of media in actually providing this feedback loop into the political process. Without media, there wouldn't be democracy. Without functioning media, there is no functioning effective society. Without media attention to this case, to this very unfortunate case that happened in Istanbul not even a month ago, the world would have not known about what happened, and they would just let Saudi Arabia press on with the controlling the people and pacifying the population, and actually stifling the independent voice of journalism and criticism of their government. This is, for me, the most important function of the media next to the education. And this is why we should all pull in, and we should give a hand and attention to the real media, not only to the Facebook. I know it's easier for every one of us to actually read a few lines in the Facebook, especially if they come from someone who knows how to manipulate and make it attractive. But coming here, this forum, for instance, is a part of this thorough process, thinking process, where should be part of every democracy. I mean, it's so important, and I really want to thank Al Jazeera Balkans for bringing us here and actually allowing us to speak about this. One question that I am interested with, and I will ask you to try to enlighten me on these issues, and I'll hand over the microphone to the audience, is related precisely to this last issue that you have also tackled in your speech, and that is media is under attack everywhere. Media is the enemy of the people. We know that media is the enemy of the people in autocratic societies, always been. But now we see that in these bastions of Western-style democracy, the leaders, such as Donald Trump, such as people in many of the countries in Europe, in Eastern Europe in particular at the moment, are calling the true media, the great media, the enemies of the people. What will future bring? How they will change this? Where do we go if in America the media is the enemy of the people? Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future?
No, actually, by nature I am optimistic. First of all, it is much better to be optimistic than much more pragmatic, actually. But I would like to say, I really feel that since I ended my speech by talking about the future and how things are going towards internationalism rather than towards fragmented identities, I do really believe that what's happening right now, the election of Trump in the United States of America, or the rise of certain extreme nationalistic tendencies in Eastern Europe and some other countries in the region, is in fact a voice from the past, not the future. It seems the old is hitting back on us. It is not going to represent the true spirit of young people looking forward to a future which is interconnected and globalized. Therefore, I am optimistic that what we are witnessing right now is a phenomena, a natural phenomena, which might survive only for a short time, and then the future trend, the historical trend right now in the humanity is in fact towards integration and communication and internationalization, not fragmentation. So this is why I am optimistic.
Well, I can only say, inshallah. I mean, I truly hope that you're right. I wish this could be a personal session, one-on-one, and I could have more questions, but I can see already a number of people who want to ask questions in the audience, so I'll probably collect 2 or 3 questions, and then we'll proceed. Yes, please, over here, over there, yes, okay, Mirnes, and over there, okay. Mr. Kovac, yes, please. The microphone is coming, don't worry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wadah, for coming to Sarajevo. Thank you for this wonderful speech. My question would be to hear your prognosis of what will happen with this case in terms of American administration and their decision. It seems like they a little bit, they stopped to talk about Khashoggi case. What do you expect will be next steps of Trump administration? First, they basically followed the Saudi Arabia and their denial, and then what do you expect will do Trump administration in this case, and what it will bring inside? Is it possible that in a case that the United States is decides to drop the current crown prince, is it going to be possible for this current crown prince to hold in power? Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was Minas Kovac, a journalist from Sarajevo, and I will also like to ask you to introduce yourself very briefly, just a name and institution you are representing here. Yes, and gentleman from Anadolu Agency, if I'm not mistaken, over there.
Yeah, Hakan Çelik from Anadolu Agency. Well, for this Khashoggi not case, the Khashoggi killing, like fighting with the flies, because as Mr. Osakowat said, I mean, there are some other regimes that are allowing that regime to do this kind of crimes, and it's not the first crime. Most probably it will not be the last one. What would you say about it? Because we want democracy, very well, no problem, I agree, but we are fighting, you know, with the introductions or with the activities of the countries who are the advocates of democracy. It's a big dilemma. And as a journalist, I don't know what can we do, but maybe you can just give your opinions about it. For example, are you happy with the US strategy and policy, let's say, just specifically in this Khashoggi killing, and also the policy of the Turkish government? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the third question over there.
Hello, my name is Emir Nuhanovic. I'm from Al Jazeera Balkans. I'm a relatively young journalist. I've been in this business for 7 years, and I want to ask you something. You mentioned the judicial system. I've noticed that not only journalists from Al Jazeera Balkans, but from other medias, not only in Bosnia, but across the region, are doing serious stories where they tell the truth about some corruption, big corruption case, and or some kind of murders. And there is a lack of reaction, not just lack of reaction from a government, you could expect that, but there is a lack of reactions from civil society. And when you've been watching this year after year, one has to ask himself a question: what's the point?
Okay,
Could you comment on that?
We can answer these three questions, and then we'll have a second round.
Thank you very much. So let me go back to the issue of Saudi Arabia and the issue of the Americans. Now, we know for sure that Mr. Trump is a personal friend of Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. This is facts. You remember that Trump's glorious visit to Saudi Arabia happened immediately after his inauguration, and he was promised $450 billion to take back to his country. Now, and I don't know what happened, because I personally, as a journalist, would like to investigate exactly the nature of this relationship, which, in my opinion, a lot of international journalists are concerned now about exactly the integrity of the White House in dealing with Saudi Arabia in particular, and we said this in the news. We noticed the first statement coming from the White House about Jamal Khashoggi was to give a scapegoat to the Saudis by suggesting rogue elements committing the crime. The concept rogue elements came first time from Trump personally through tweet. He said he suspects that the Saudi government itself is not involved. It is rogue elements. But when international pressure again with media across the world, and especially the American media, started a counterattack against this concept, and when facts were revealed gradually by the Turks, the Turkish authorities, it became very difficult to hold that narrative. So he changed into demanding clarity and so on and so forth, and he went even up to attacking the narrative that the Saudis did launch gradually. Why that is happening? We are heading in America to midterm elections on the 7th of November. It means 1 week from now. This is going to be very crucial elections in America. You have the Republicans and the Democrats. The issue of Jamal Khashoggi became a domestic issue for the Trump administration. The attack of journalists, especially Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, and many other outlets about the position of Trump himself regarding this issue and the underplay of it and the attempt cover of it led to a rhetoric which was in a way higher. But that rhetoric didn't mean anything on the ground. Trump spoke louder than before about Jamal Khashoggi, but he gave time to the Saudis by many visits and many declarations that the Saudis are investigation, believe it or not. The Saudi authorities formed an investigation committee led by the Crown Prince, who is accused of giving the order of the killing. And then they sent the Attorney General to Turkey another few days to take time, this is the point. Drag the issue as long as you can so it may die down. Now, the Attorney General, when you hear the word Attorney General in any respected democratic system, supposed to be an independent person who doesn't have any relationship to the authorities. This is the separation of power. The Attorney General of Saudi Arabia is the same guy who approved putting 1,660 people in jail without court orders. Some of them have been in jail for 15 years, without proper accusation, without any lawyers, without any judiciary. He is the same guy who asked just 1 month ago a death sentence for some people who tweeted, young people and some scholars and respected figures of the society, because one tweet. He was now, this same Attorney General asked for death sentence for him. And he is the guy who is now flying, and media is falling in the trap of following the meeting between the Saudi Attorney General and his counterpart in Turkey, as if there is a judicial system in Saudi Arabia that could be accountable about this issue. So I call upon journalists not to fall in this trap. I hear also sometimes our friends and colleagues speaking about the mystery of Jamal Khashoggi killing. It has not been unrevealed yet. It has been revealed. This is the most clear crime ever committed. We know the person killed, the person who was killed, where he was killed, what hour he was killed, who killed him, why did he kill him. All of that, there is nothing mysterious about it. The only thing, there is a process of cover-up. And you know that the Saudis have billions of dollars to spend on proxies and PR companies across the world. And this issue of mystery and contradicting narratives is another fake way of dragging this story, forward, hoping that it will die. But it is not going to die, because two things are going to happen. Number one, his colleagues across the world are determined to continue this issue until the person who ordered the killing, and now everyone is convinced that it is Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, should pay the price for it. Second, there is legal systems across the world will be implemented, especially in the United States of America and in Britain, many other countries. People are going to have court cases and going to further this issue internationally. Third, in my opinion, Turkey, they have very smart policy of revealing the truth drip by drip. That was important. Because the most important thing, in my opinion, the Turkish, justification of why they are doing this kind of policy, Turkey would have been left alone versus Saudi Arabia. Turkey succeeded on not politicizing the issue from the beginning. They put it on a judicial track and investigative track, neither than on a political track. Because if it was Mr. Erdogan appearing in media and start, a campaign against Saudi Arabia, it would have been said it is Saudi Arabia versus Turkey, rivalry, and they are fighting against each other. But the fact that he made partnership with media, and the Turks made partnership with international systems as well by revealing audio tapes and facts to international agencies and to many other institutions, then the international campaign and understanding actually started taking the lead rather than the Turkish direct attack or direct counter with Saudi Arabia. So that I would say it was a very smart way of handling the crisis. Where it is heading, in fact, now we are in front of a following situation. A kingdom like Saudi Arabia is very important in the region, is going to be very soon led by a king who is accused of a crime of this magnitude. Not only this, of course, we have many other things, but let us concentrate now on this. Beside the fact of Yemen has been destroyed, and beside the fact that thousands of people are in jail, and many other issues. To what extent a person like that will be able to really lead his country towards a reasonable standards of good governance, or let us assume a reasonable standards of being part of the international society? How many elected politicians in the West will be proud to take a photo opportunity with Mohammed bin Salman after this issue? I think he has been wounded deeply, and I think he should not continue this track, because the country that he's going to lead is going to be in a major issue, in a major disaster. Now, of course, I know, I am aware, I'm not naive. I am aware of the dynamics and the ways of politicians in the world. I know that money sometimes buys allegiance, and I know that the American administration will definitely try their best to make him survive this crisis. And I know that corporations in the world would like to invest in Saudi Arabia, and they are willing as well to participate in the cover-up. But believe me, again and again, we should not underestimate the people. I will remind you with one small story, which I personally was shocked, and I'll conclude with it. You remember a gentleman called, not gentle actually anyway, Muammar Gaddafi, the leader, the great leader of Libya. You remember him? You remember his first speech when the revolution in Libya started? He appeared on the public and he said, "Who are you? Who are you? You are nothing." And actually this is important. I think dictators like that don't know or don't see people. For them, people do not exist. In Saudi Arabia, as I said, people are not important or necessary to take their opinion. It has been the case in Libya, and Libyan people were very gentle and lovely nation that were not really controversial. But when oppression and lack of democracy and tyranny becomes overwhelming, any human being, regardless of his nature, will definitely move. And then, who are you is going to be too late. Because by then, this regime is going to be collapsing and descending into chaos. And I hope that Saudi Arabia will never descend into chaos if this current leadership is actually moved out of power.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a lady there, a gentleman behind her. Okay, lady was first, and lady here, yes.
International University of Sarajevo. You were talking about providing journalists with international passports. What makes you believe that national authorities are going to respect or appreciate international passports when they don't appreciate or respect their national passports and their citizens? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now,
okay, maybe we collect yeah, for the sake of clarity. Yes, please, gentleman over there.
Should I ask the question now? Assalamu alaikum. Mr. Khanfar, my name is Osman Softic. I am occasional analyst. I write analysis about the Middle East sometimes for Boston and international newspapers. I'm wondering if you can elaborate more and contextualize the murder or assassination of Mr. Khashoggi in the context of Saudi Arabian-Turkey relations for the hearts and minds of the Muslims of the world, and how this murder can or will it affect the relations between, because some predicted there is some hidden, not to speak of the war, but kind of simmering conflict between the two countries that is largely hidden from the public for primacy in the Muslim world, at least for the hearts and minds of the Muslim world, which we don't hear much in our own media here.
Thank you. And lady over here.
Salam. Thank you for being here with us today. My name is Fatima Popraklic, and I'm student of Law Faculty, University of Sarajevo. Bearing in mind the fact that this case actually happened in Istanbul, in Turkey, and the fact that Mr. President Erdogan hasn't gave an official statement, I'm sorry, for 3 weeks, how would you like to comment his act or his passive action? I know that Turkey now has to be really professional and that it has actually to be objective, but still I would like to, if you can, give me an answer. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, you know, why do we, to answer your question, what is next, even if we unveil truth and we fight for it and we make investigation, everything we do will accumulate into knowledge and knowledge will become power in the hand of the public. You should never, as a journalist, underestimate revealing the truth, even if it has very expensive cost. It might not be immediate. Sometimes we have this concept of immediacy, that if I reveal the truth today, tomorrow the world will change. It does not. You might reveal the truth now, but after 10 years, that truth that you revealed will work its way through the ladder of change until it becomes a radical one. Never, I mean, a journalist should never ask, what did I do and why did you do it? Because it is right. What's going to happen later will happen. Believe me, people will never forget things, but they might not act upon it immediately. Second, we may, as a journalist, definitely a journalist, I used to carry, also I'm a Palestinian, the Palestinian passport is not the most greatest thing in the world, but at the same time, I used to carry as well Jordanian passport. And easily, once you say to anyone across most of the third world countries, I'm a journalist, that's enough to bar you from coming to the country, regardless what passport to. The necessity of having a reference, international one, or jurisdiction papers, not to be blackmailed by the documents. Because most of the countries, and I know a lot in the Arab world now, they don't give passports or documents or any certificate from the authorities to a journalist if that journalist is in a way or another not working for the regime. And that's the problem. I'm not saying that the passport would be great to travel with, but I'm saying at least the passport will prevent the manipulation of authorities over journalists who are living in their countries. At least that might be one of the things. And the issue of Mr. Erdogan, why did he say or what did he say? Mr. Erdogan, 1 month ago, exactly, 1 week ago, he said that he's going to reveal the truth. And he spoke in a speech to his parliamentary group. What was necessary about his speech? He did definitely give a lot of credibility to the leaks, which was necessary. Because up to that moment, it was unofficial leaks. When the president spoke, he described how the crime was committed. Therefore, whatever leak was done, now officially is a position of the state. This is number one. Second, yes, he did not reveal things that we thought it should be revealed, although I personally predicted not going to be revealed, which is the audio tape which everyone is speaking about. Now it is confirmed by many people and many sources that there is an audio tape recorded through the crime in the consulate itself that describe everything happened in that event from the moment that Jamel entered the office of the Consular General until he was murdered and mutilated. That tape does exist, in my opinion, with the authorities. It has not been revealed yet for many reasons. One of them, they might not be happy to reveal something that was gathered through intelligence. Could be one of the justifications. But again, it seems it has been handed over to the Attorney General. Therefore, it will be made one day public or something like that. I personally felt happy that the president in himself, Erdogan, did not take aggressive stance in this particular issue by letting the world stand with him rather than making it a personal issue between Turkey and Saudi Arabia. So this is in general. Although I would love to see the tape myself. I would love to hear about it, and I think that it's nice. I mean, it's going to be an evidence, of course, which I think the public will have the right to know about it. So this is, and the third one was about, what was the third?
Context of Saudi-Turkey relationship.
The context of Saudi-Turkey relationship. Now, let me tell you something important. In the region that we are living in, we are going in a state of flux. We used to have some knowledge about basic kind of alliances happening. So Saudi Arabia, in particular, used to have certain alliances. During the last 3 years, we have a crown prince in Saudi Arabia who changed the games. Now, you have Saudi Arabia and Emirates very close to the Israeli way of thinking and the Egyptians, plus the American administration. This becoming one bloc. You have Turkey, which has strong ties with other countries like Qatar and good understanding with Iran at the same time, and also some relationships in Central Asia, which is forming in a way another dimension. I won't say that this is like a strict, clear boundaries alliances. It's not an axis, but there are certain kind of mentalities happening in the region. In the case of Saudi Arabia in particular, what made the Saudi regime powerful enough to commit all these kind of crimes and to put people in jail and to fund the counter-revolutions that happened through the Arab Spring is actually the cover that was given by the Americans and the Israelis. No doubt about this. Trump, in a way, gave a cover to the regime in Saudi Arabia to do whatever they want to do. And now they are acting on behalf of the international or behalf of the American administration in the region. And this is why they feel impunity and no one can actually counter them. But again, we all understand now that Mr. Trump himself is implicated in millions of things inside his country, including the investigation that Mueller is not running now. So all our eyes are on the elections again on 7th of February. And I think it is very important station to notice how the American public are going to vote for the Republicans or the Democrats, and therefore to measure exactly the power. Because if the House is taken by the Democrats, then Trump administration is going to be in a deep dilemma. Thus, his allies in the region, Mohammed bin Salman and others, are going to be as well in a deep crisis.
Thank you very much. This is indeed a crucial point in history that we are living in. After what will happen after midterm elections, United States history might take a completely different turn. Let's hope for the best. One final round of questions, gentlemen over there, and 2 questions over there. Yes, lady over there and gentleman over there. That will be the final round. Thank you.
My name is محفوظ. بالمناسبة أنا من موريتانيا وأرحب بحضورك هنا. My question is, in Jamel case, are you looking for justice or truth? As you know, there is no justice in the world. If you are looking for the truth, why you don't ask the Turkish government? Or are you still expecting something from the Prince Mohammed bin Salman? That was my question. The second question is, you said something about human central value, which can brought us together. Do you think that this value cannot be bought or sold? The third question, cannot be bought or sold, this value. Yeah, let's money talk. The third question is, you asked the United Nations for help. Do you still believe in the United States after what is happening in the world? United Nations. Yeah. The last one, do you think that Jamal Khashoggi rahimahullah is more important than people who killed around the world? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now, this is the last question, I think. No.
Thank you. My name is Amina Muzaffaria. I'm a master's student of international relations at Birch University. These attacks on journalists and people who work for media are nothing new. But what do you think, how much of the blame for the attacks should be blamed on journalists themselves, given the fact that a lot of them cooperate with the regime, a lot of them have shown to be hypocritical and tend to be corrupt. And in this sense, how do you think the nature of the profession will be changed in the time to come based on the recent events with Khashoggi? Thank you.
And the final one, gentleman next.
Hi. I'm just a traveller from Australia. I have no journalistic qualifications whatsoever. But I think that people are no longer ignorant about what's happening in the world. I think that's pretty obvious. We've all got the internet. So I'm going to have a straight out question to you, and that is, how much intervention does the BBC have on filtering stories on the Al Jazeera brand?
So justice and the truth are, in a way or another, necessary both in order to achieve final satisfaction. Not only in Jamal case, in any other case. So when I speak about truth now we know most of it. The only thing that the Saudis are hiding, who did order the killing. Now we know in any regime, let us assume, I don't want to say Sarajevo because I hope we will never witness a brutal situation like this. In any country, whenever the institutions of the government, multi-institutions, interagency operation conducted on such a scale, The political responsibility is on the head of the government. That's like a basic, we don't need to teach. But to tell me, you know what, yes, the intelligence and the royal guards and the royal special forces of Mohammed bin Salman himself and the Ministry of Interior were involved. But you see, the Crown Prince didn't know, really. And if he didn't know, why he's a Crown Prince then? Why he's a leader of a country? How is this country is run? I mean, so first of all, that's very clear. Politically, he's responsible. That's important. Justice here, which I mean, is to expose that. We are not, I mean, journalists are very soft power in a way. We don't have the power to invade the country and put someone in jail from a regime. We can't do this. But at least we are empowering the public with the truth. And once that truth is there, the achieving justice is not our task personally. Achieving justice is the task of international community, International Criminal Court, United Nations, or whoever in charge of achieving justice as far as states are concerned. So this is, to be clear about it. Why I believe in the United Nations or not believe, I am very critical of the United Nations, but I do believe the United Nations is still the only instrument available in front of us that we could address on issues not only of judicial matter, but on issues of political consensus. United Nations needs a lot of reform, and that is another topic. I don't want to go into it. But again, yes, the world is in need for a body like the United Nations to regulate and to communicate and to enshrine certain kind of political and policies across the world. And I am advocate of that. If we speak about internationalism, I speak about mechanisms of internationalism. The United Nations has faults, but again, it needs to be reformed, not to be destroyed, because there is no other alternative for it, unfortunately. The third matter about the Arabs and Muslims and their reaction to the situation. What is sad about Jamal Khashoggi and many others, like Salman al-Ouda as well, who is a very popular figure in Saudi Arabia, who has been in a way in court, and the Attorney General asked for death sentence. He did a tweet one day. In my opinion, that is happening in the land of Islam. What's scary about this? Now, we call the King of Saudi Arabia the custodian of the two holy mosques. That's important. So, and they refer to their judicial system as the system of Sharia. And their constitution is Quran. Now, if that is what you are standing for, it's very painful. I am, as a Muslim, don't want to be in a position where you are committing all these atrocities and still calling yourself the custodian of the two holy mosques, ruling by Sharia, and your constitution is Quran. That's scary. You know, again, that is reminding us of the religious situation that happened in Europe. When the Pope give you a cover for any prince or a king, he can do whatever under the divine mandate. We have a divine mandate now. And we should not accept the word of Islam to be used within a context of injustice. So that is also something that we need to be clear about. And if we are moving forward, we should even understand that to continue having this situation is complicated. Now, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people cannot go for Hajj or Umrah, for example, because the regime doesn't like them. Are we going to accommodate that? Are we going to use the religious, institutions, the religious holy places, as a tool in the hand of a regime that is punishing people and stopping them from doing their own religious duties? That's very complicated topic, and I think people should think about this issue in particular. About our friend from Australia, which I think very interesting question. First, you are welcome from Australia. Everyone loves Australia and Canada. I don't know why, but wherever I go in the world, people like Australia and Canada. And yes, BBC. When I did join Jazeera, by the way, in 1997, when I landed in Doha to go to the newsroom, every camera and the studio equipment was written on it BBC, because the equipments of BBC Arabic at that time that closed down in 1995 were transferred to Al Jazeera headquarters in 1996. And Al Jazeera was launched the 1st of November, which is tomorrow, 1990, today or tomorrow? Tomorrow, 1996. 1996, exactly. So what I want to say, yes, we did learn a lot. The founding team of Al Jazeera, 70 of them who landed together in Doha to establish the network, were former BBC employees. And until today, we have that kind of strong influence from the traditional. I respect the BBC, of course. I respect the Western media that has certain role. But I would say Al Jazeera didn't continue to be BBC. It did have BBC as an input, but Al Jazeera became a brand on its own. Al Jazeera had a spirit on its own. It understood the communities that we are addressing, and we developed the philosophy and the discourse and even professional standards that became later on known as Al Jazeera Spirit or Al Jazeera Code of Ethics and Code of Conduct. So Al Jazeera as an institution is definitely a distinct school of journalism that is necessary to be understood on its own rather than to be an extension of any other Western media.
Just the very important question that the lady raised about the journalists who share their share of guilt by cooperating with the oppressive regimes. I think.
Yeah, even these people, I don't want to regard them as journalists in a way or another, because again, they are part of propaganda. We have a lot of propagandists. You should remember that the Nazis in Germany had a strong propaganda. They had TV stations and radio stations here in Balkan. You know the role of media. So in my opinion, when I spoke about journalists, I intentionally mentioned 5 criteria, and I told you these are the people who we need to support them. Because the word journalism is abused by tyrants and regimes as it is abused by powerful and wealthy. Because a lot of corporations are using also journalism as a cover-up for their, for their manipulation of economic system. So we need to be aware who is the journalist that we stand for. Who is the journalist that we regard him as a true, journalist who deserves to be supported. And this is why I think we need organizations. The public, by the way, are invited to form such organizations that, in a way or another, investigate what journalism is doing. So it is journalism watch as well, where we hold them accountable for lying or for fake news or for spreading rumors, if they are doing that for the sake of their masters in a way or another. I'm not saying give any journalist a blank check. No. Be sure who is the real journalist and support him. And the rest of the guys, in my opinion, should be condemned as, part of the propaganda machine of regimes.
Thank you very much. Before I invite Mr. Harun Karcic from Al Jazeera to officially close this session today, I would like to invite the audience to join me in a round of applause for our distinguished speaker today.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've been tasked with the honor of providing a couple of concluding remarks. So if there's anything we can conclude from today's session, it is that rapid political, technological, and economic transformations have placed new strains on media freedoms. Along with that, the rise of new forms of political populism and authoritarian tendencies in Europe, the United States, but also in Brazil and the Philippines, are worrying signals of repression and violations of civil liberties. Various forms of state control and pressure over the content of media continue to hamper their independence, with governments increasingly monitoring the content and the sources of news, citing a wide range of reasons, including national security, to justify their meddling. The ever-increasing centrality of the internet in communications and the accompanying role of powerful internet platforms which transcend physical boundaries have drawn the attention of governments seeking to clamp down on these forms of communication. Making government abuses known to the public is the first and most essential step in redressing human rights abuses and holding governments accountable. Instances of torture, discrimination, corruption, or misuse of power by governments and military juntas have come to light because of the work of brave investigative journalists. Unfortunately, it is these very journalists who pay the highest price. Cases of journalists who are locked up because of their work, or worse, brutally tortured and killed, continue to occur. Jamal Khashoggi is a case in point. Though the killings of foreign correspondents tend to garner international publicity, it is, however, overwhelmingly local journalists who are mostly victims of state-sponsored repression. Political groups, military officials, insurgent militias, and criminal organizations have directly targeted and sought to silence these journalists. The arbitrary imprisonment of journalists, fosters self-censorship, and impinges on the public's right to access information. Recent Gallup polls of residents in 130 countries across the globe have suggested that there's a general perception of declining media freedoms across many countries. At the same time, media freedom remains recognized and valued by people around the world. Freedom of the media is essential for the protection of human rights. Free, independent, and pluralistic media based on freedom of information and expression is a core element of any functioning democracy. Unfortunately, impunity for crimes against journalists remains the norm, with justice served, according to UNESCO, in only 1 in 10 cases. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of myself and the Al Jazeera Balkans channel, I would like to thank Mr. Wadah Khanfar for coming to Sarajevo. I would like to thank all of you, dear viewers, dear guests, for taking the time and effort to join us today. It's been a true honor and a pleasure having you here. Thank you once again.